Hey, this is Mike Diercksen from Proactive, and you're listening to the Building Byte podcast. Tune in as we spotlight our guest, Peter Ukstins, Head of Construction Risk Engineering at AXA XL. Our episode today is focused on the keys to advancing quality. For more information on this episode and others, please check out the Building Byte at www.buildwithproactive.com.
Welcome to the Building Byte podcast, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you'll hear from the experts about key topics to help you be successful. I'm Chris Epps, Vice President with Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mike Diercksen, our Manager of Marketing and Business Development. Today, we welcome our guest, Pete Ukstins. Pete is the newly minted Head of Construction Risk Engineering at AXA XL. Pete, congratulations, and thanks for taking time out to join us. I know you're super busy these days, so
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us. And Mike, how about yourself? How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Glad we got a few minutes of Pete's time here, and excited to dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Pete, definitely a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Before we dive in, I'd like to give our listeners a little bit of a background on our guests and kind of your career path and what led you to your current role at AXA XL.
Okay. Well, maybe a different, unique path than maybe others have taken when they've come to insurance. But so I've started my career about 25 years ago in construction. Mm-hmm. I had a very short stay with insurance as a claims adjuster for about 2 years. And then I went to work for a large general contractor in the Mid-Atlantic area. And with that company, I worked through various operational roles in project management and eventually stepped up to lead and develop their company's quality, sustainability, and also lean programs. And I filled that role, that leadership role, for about 5 years prior to making the move to insurance. And so since joining AXA, I've been working as a risk engineer for the subcontractor default insurance and partnering with our insureds to understand their operations and how corporate policies and procedures are implemented across their projects and providing some guidance and knowledge sharing. And then for the last 18 months, I was team lead working closely with our SDI risk engineer manager and helping to support him with the team strategy and administration. And then, as you mentioned, now just recently, last month, took on a new position within the company as head of construction risk engineering. And so now I lead and support 3 dedicated risk engineering teams for builders risk and property, the second for primary and casualty, and then the third for the subcontractor default insurance.
Certainly plenty on your plate to handle now with the 3 teams, Pete, but well-deserved, and we're very excited for you and the opportunity you were given. But it's also a great topic for our conversation today, given the new role you're sitting in as you now oversee those 3 teams. So today's topic is centered around the keys to advancing quality. You know, it's a topic that I feel like it's extremely important. A lot of people talk about it, but I wonder if it somehow doesn't get kind of the bystander effect. People think about quality. I think everyone kind of assumes that things happen. The other person's doing something. And in the end, we know that mistakes can happen, right? Claims happen, things happen that go awry on the project. So for your experience, you know, you mentioned coming from the field, adjuster, contractor, SDI risk engineering, now as the head of risk engineering. How do you see, you know, the issue of quality in those different roles, and has that evolved over time for you?
Yeah. So first off, specific to quality, the bystander effect is real. You know, if quality is everyone's responsibility, then clearly that means that no one specifically is responsible. And so we keep that in mind when we're talking to our insureds about, like, how do we advance quality in construction? How do they advance that within their companies? And we start by really asking about the company's culture. And we focus on what we term as a top-down approach. And so there's 3 key things that we focus in on. The first is leadership and structure. And so we're really looking at the leadership from the CEO or the president, how that's supported by a structured team. It could be a corporate quality director and regional directors, really anyone who is there to support and ensure consistency and support with field operations. The second component, communication. We're communicating expectations is very important, and so not just establishing policies and procedures, but making sure that there's a cycle to include measuring them and adjusting them when that implementation is inconsistent or found to not meet the company's expectations. And then that third component is really around education and training. Effective implementation requires education, training for all employees to make sure that it develops a cohesive team that's committed to quality. Two of my colleagues wrote a white paper on this topic, and we actually produced our very own podcast. Risk Engineering is now producing several podcasts on our Risk Engineering Insights page on topics such as contract reviews, risk and mass timber, tech adoption, and quality. And this one specifically kind of talks through and breaks down that top-down quality approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously a worthwhile goal there. One we know specific to claims and claims that we deal with is increasingly important for insureds, given the magnitude of rework as a component of claim scope. So I guess building on that a little bit, Pete, what do you think are some best practices for insureds to be taking up when they're addressing quality control, maybe beyond those 3 points?
Yeah, honestly, I think it comes back to culture of the company. Mm-hmm. And I think of, like, in my past life and even current life, like when I would hear someone say that they've done it a certain way for 30 years, we don't need to change. I always like to ask how. And I ask how from the curiosity standpoint of, like, how are you able to keep doing things the same way when everything else and everyone else's changes? How are you successful to not change? And, and I find that in those discussions, it's less about someone being resistant to change, but that's simply not having the time or feeling empowered to pursue those new ideas. And so I can't say I don't hear that a lot anymore when someone's like, oh, we've been doing it this way forever, we're not going to change. Because I truly feel the construction industry started to shift to that new way of thinking. I mean, there's new delivery methods for projects. There's more emphasis on collaborative planning. There's more of a focus now on quality, like it was with safety many years ago. Mm-hmm. There's lean efficiency and management in the field that's being implemented. And the companies that understand this are going to be very profitable in the years to come. I think the other thing around culture that kind of ties to quality is the construction industry now has probably almost 5 different generations in the workforce. I think the baby boomers are kind of starting to retire. We now have Gen X and the millennials making up most of the workforce. Gen Z is becoming part of the construction industry. And then in a few years, Gen Alpha, like there's a whole other generation of talent that we're going to want to pursue. And it's these newer generations that are looking for companies that are very forward thinking. And that's just the way it is now. It's all very positive, but that's now creating some newer challenges for us to have to stay on top of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, culture is a hard thing to change, but does, I guess a little bit of a changing of the guard there and increased technology in the construction space sort of seem to be prompting that, especially, and you touched on a great point, which is driving profit margins on, traditionally thin profit margins for contractors. When you can directly correlate quality with reduced cost and adding to your bottom line, that's got to be a big motivator for a contractor to maybe make that shift in mindset or shift in culture to get to that point.
Yeah. I think there's also kind of a little bit of that culture, back to your question about the rework. There's the willingness to be open and transparent. And so rather than kind of pushing issues underneath the rug, and that's typically where the rework occurs, something got installed incorrectly, it needs to be fixed, kind of push it underneath the rug, fix it, and go about their business. But if you catch something that was installed wrong, that should be celebrated. Like that should be similar to a near miss in safety. It should be a quality catch or a near catch or whatever you would want to term it in the world of quality, but should celebrate the fact that the quality program actually works. You caught something, you've corrected it, and it doesn't get installed multiple times as you go up through a building or through the project, but you can celebrate that the program is working.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep harping on this word that we've been talking about with the culture, right? And I think that's important. And last time we spoke, Pete, you kind of mentioned that your team had formed a collaborative with a group centered around quality in the construction industry. Yeah. And I feel like there's a part of that cultural shift is happening too, right? Where it's less about, hey, keep your head down, just focus on yourself. I think people are starting to share that information more. So groups like this are forming and realizing, hey, if we're all better, it increases margins for everyone, right? This is a positive for the industry as a whole. So can you share a little bit more about that group and kind of the goals of what you're looking to accomplish there?
Yeah, I mean, so taking a quick step back, so AXA XL has several peer knowledge networks, and they were designed to get the right people engaged in deeper discussions around certain topics. We have them. It's really kind of looking for the people that may not be typically involved in insurance or risk discussions. So, for example, we have one network that's built around innovation and technology. We have a network that's built around sustainability and sustainable practices and energy. And then we have the other one, which you're alluding to, the quality collaborative. And so the quality collaborative is made up of people who, it's across all of our lines of business, but really focus on developing and leading quality at their companies. It could be that corporate quality director, or it could be a project executive or senior project manager that's really passionate about quality and is trying to lead and drive change for quality at their company. And so we host monthly calls, and the people on the call really set the agenda, lead the discussion, and then present challenges to their peers of things that they're trying or experimenting with, and really kind of come up with solutions as a group. We're very mindful not to make this as a platform for AXA XL to present any type of requirements or recommendations. There's no, you have to do this to be insured. It's really kind of creating that informal think tank, so people can come and really discuss their challenges and share ideas.
And I think a key point there, as you said, Pete, is it's not just one line of business, right? So it could be various industries, and sometimes just looking at a problem from a different vantage point, like the answer is easy to you, right? So I'm sure there's opportunities where sometimes an insured from one industry says, "Oh, have you tried this?" And it's the magic bullet that we just couldn't see beforehand.
It happens, yeah.
I mean, Pete, that sounds like an awesome opportunity for your insureds to get together and have those discussions and brainstorming sessions and knowledge share. I would imagine that the best successes coming out of that are the ones we don't hear about, right? It's some problem you mitigated that it maybe doesn't arise down the road for one of your insureds. But are there some successes that have kind of bubbled up there that you can kind of share coming out of that group?
Yeah, I mean, I think the topics for these calls could go really any different way. I think more recently we've had some calls and some conversation around water mitigation plans. A company is trying to develop or change how they're managing water on their jobs through construction and testing and inspections. We had another one or two calls focused on lessons learned, really trying to dig into how companies are leveraging lessons learned from projects independently to across the book of projects within their company, but then trying to figure out how to communicate that out. And I think really the biggest the better success for those two examples is really how the calls have developed over time. And so as AXA XL is hosting the calls, we would like to, we come with a topic in our back pocket just to be prepared. We don't want to have empty space on the phone calls.
Right.
But we always start off the calls by asking, does anyone have anything that they want to talk about? Is there anything that you're challenged with that you want to get input from the group? And really over probably the last year, we kicked this off about 3 years ago. We're getting into our third year, but over the last year, we've seen a very positive shift on these calls that the majority of the discussion now is presented and facilitated by the group members, by our insureds. And that's exactly what we intended for. And in fact, on a few of the calls, people come to the call and said, all right, I was waiting for this call because I wanted to ask this question to this group. I wanted to find out what you guys are trying to do. And so that's really exciting for us to hear that we can kind of really take a back seat and learn from this group of peers.
Got to be pretty. Sorry, I was going to say it's got to be pretty gratifying in terms of purpose for that group to develop and come to fruition that way.
It really is. And it's creating a great network of peers, too, that other people can leverage. And we know that there's offshoot conversations that occur now at industry events and conferences where they're meeting each other and they're having other side conversations. So it's just expanding that network of people.
I was going to say that it feels like the epitome of when you're doing a presentation and everyone in the beginning kind of filters into the back of the auditorium. I feel like now you've reached the stats where like, all right, everyone's going to move to the front first. Like, all right, I want to be up there. That's definitely a nice place to be for you guys.
That's a great analogy, and one of the things that we wanted to do early on when we set the stage was we wanted to establish some conditions of satisfaction from the group. We wanted to make sure, and we want to take time out each year to kind of talk to the group and say, are we still providing value to the members? What needs to happen to make sure you continue calling in to these calls? We want to make sure that's established by the group for the group to make sure that the group is still relevant and valuable. And so we established this group back in December of 2022. So we are coming in. This is the end of year 2. We're having our next conditions of satisfaction call with the group next Monday, this coming Monday, to get into our 3rd year to make sure that we're continuing to move forward.
That's awesome. Well, Pete, we appreciate your time. As we mentioned at the top, you're a busy man. So it's been great for you to kind of share some of this expertise and the resources available to the insureds. One of the things we'd like to do is leave our audience with 3 key takeaways. So keeping in mind that typically our audience is made up of contractors, risk professionals, carriers, brokers, the stakeholders within our industry. What do you think the 3 key takeaways should be from today's episode for them?
Yes. 3 things that I can think of. The first, specific to quality, would be if a company has policies and procedures in place, that's a great first step. But having it formally written down doesn't always count. What counts is how the company is going to implement the quality, how it manages consistency. That's critical. It needs to be routinely checked, verified, and then maybe tweaked and adjusted for specific conditions. The second item, a second takeaway, would be really kind of goes back to culture, is building a culture around people and respect for people. I think construction is becoming less about one's technical abilities, while that's still important, but a person's soft skills and the ability to work with others is becoming more equally important.
Yeah.
And then the third is really more of an encouragement that the more a company works with their insurance risk engineers, the more the risk engineers can understand a company's business, how it operates, both good and bad, the better we can work then with underwriting to support policy coverages, endorsements, and ultimately pricing.
Man, it's interesting to hear you put a very fine point on one of those, your second bullet there, Pete, which was, the soft skills, which don't get a lot of attention in construction a lot of times, I feel like, but also just having come from the field, seeing how many problems and issues arise out of failure to communicate effectively, and people just coming at each other from adverse positions and not having the soft skills to work through those issues, and then they result in bad outcomes for the people involved, and that really driving an unfortunate part of the business. But hearing that as kind of just a point of improvement and a focus for improvement for the industry is something we haven't heard a lot, but it is just extremely valuable. And it kind of, got my antenna up when you said that, because it's just not something that gets a lot of attention, I think, as it probably should.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to having staff and labor shortages in the industry. We know that there's a shortage of people going into trade schools and coming out of the trades and apprenticeships. It's not to discount those technical abilities, which again are very important and are critical to building the infrastructure that we're working around. But having soft skills and being able to relate to one another, being able to communicate and have discussions, being open and collaborative versus being like a dictator and trying to push beliefs or dates on people is important. That's how things are getting built these days. And that's the big shift I think I've seen in the industry over the last several years. I mean, a lot's going to change, I think, in the next 5 years versus what's changed in the last 10 or 15 years. I think we're really on the kind of the tip of the hump, getting ready to see a lot of changes.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree. Seems like we're picking up speed in the right direction along those lines. Given that, if our listeners are kind of looking to make a change, working toward those solutions, what's the first action item? What's the first step you would recommend towards, getting moving in the right direction.
Now that I'm in the seat of an insurance carrier, I would say to those listening on the podcast, like, reach out to your insurance carrier and ask them, what can you do to help us improve? I think insurance is great to have when you need it, but it's also a great resource, and it can be often out of sight, out of mind in the day-to-day operations. But it's a great resource to kind of partner together. We can, carriers provide project-focused services, show claims trends and data to support a company's growth and efforts. I know that's what we do at AXA XL, and that's what the market should expect from all carriers.
Yeah, it's important to remember we're working on the same team sometimes. You're both incentivized with risk mitigation and reduced risk. So great recommendation there. Before we let you go, I'd love to hit you with a few more quick questions, of rapid fire. But, what gets you most excited about the work you're doing, and what gets you out of bed in the morning?
It's the people. It's the connections that we have internally with the team. It's our insureds, and it's really just the energy that exists to just continuously improve and challenge the status quo.
How about, is there an issue in particular, Pete, that kind of keeps you up at night professionally? Like, what's the one thing you guys keep running into that it's kind of the rolling that stone up the hill, trying to get to the top?
Yeah, I should probably say water. Being an insurance carrier, it's going to be water. It's going to be water, not intrusion from the building facade or roof itself, but it's really the release of water within building systems. So that's a big one. I think the other one really that I think about most is efficiency. I think we can relate that again, kind of going back to culture and resources, that the time is limited, resources are constrained. We really need to be efficient in what we do and how we build. And in the past, I feel like there sometimes could be like pride or like a badge of honor when someone says, "Man, I'm so busy. I'm working long hours and weekends." Well, I challenge that now. Like, are we being efficient in how we're working? Are we focused on how we're working? Why are we working long hours and weekends? Is there a better way? And we can't just put our head down anymore and just do the day's task. We need to decide if the right energy is on the right tasks, and look at the bigger picture and look for ways to do our jobs and manage the work-life balance a lot better.
Definitely. One last one I'd have for you, Pete, and you mentioned it earlier. You said we're kind of on the hump of where we're at in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, I won't hold you to any predictions today, but where do you see the industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years, right, when it comes to quality? Is there a breakthrough moment, you think, or what does it look like to you?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, project specifications kind of outlining, requiring more quality plans and more emphasis on quality. I think, companies are hiring more dedicated quality leaders to manage quality programs. We're seeing non-conformances and defects being tracked, and not just at the project level anymore, but now they're being brought up to the company level to be viewed and drive consistency and really to allow the companies identify areas for improvement. Right. There's the growing use of technology, allowing companies to create dashboards, tracking metrics. And there's a lot of industry organizations now and conferences that are focused specifically on quality. So those are just a few of the things that I think that are driving change specific to quality. But I really see that being that wave that's going to make big changes over the next several years versus where we've been.
Yeah, like you said at the top as well, if it's everyone's problem, then it's no one's specific issue to watch. So bringing someone to the room that has a dedicated purpose for that is going to make pay dividends for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Pete, we really thank you for your time. As you know, this is the Building Byte podcast. So that stands for Building Insurance Technology with the Experts. You are today's expert. So I know you're based out of the DC, Maryland area. Where are you taking the bite out of today?
So if you're talking about like the food, I have to stick with Baltimore. I have to stick with the crab cakes. There's Jimmy's Famous Seafood. They have famous crab cakes, and then there's another one which is downtown Baltimore and kind of the Fells Inner Harbor area called Nick's Fish House. So those are really my two go-to places.
Excellent.
Put them on the list, Mike. We'll add them to our next DC trip. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. Well, Pete, thank you again for taking the time out to chat with us today. If our listeners want to hook up with you after the podcast airs, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say, LinkedIn is a nice way to kind of search my name and send me a message. But of course, I can provide my email, text, phone. I'm always available. I'm always willing to kind of brainstorm, share knowledge, think about things, meet up somewhere. I'm always happy to connect with people and expand that peer network.
Fantastic. Hopefully, Mike and I will be able to take you up on some blue crabs and crab cakes at some point here in the near future. But thank you again for joining us. Definitely appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me for this. This was fun.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.